Welcome to the Beach Brothers Show, Virginia business and politics. It's time to get beachy. Conrad is our political analyst and master chess instructor. So contact Conrad to appear on our show. Jose Cruz is our bilingual beach bully, our bilingual business bully. Contact him to feature your business on our show. I'm Seko, Varner. I have consulting, entertainment, and credit repair services. I produce the Beach Brothers Show. We want to give a salute to Tally and Twine. It's time for you to have a high quality watch made in Virginia, made in Portsmouth, Virginia, from Tally and Twine. We want to say thanks to Southern Volkswagen Greenbrier for their great level of sponsorship. If you need a new car, you don't need to go far. Southern Volkswagen Greenbrier. And ladies, if you want your brows to say, wow, check out IamLitaWee.com. Microblading by IamLitaWee.com. I'm Seko Varner. I do credit fixes, tax resolutions. I lend private money to real estate investors, and we do debt consolidations. If you need any of these services, contact me as provided. And now it's time to get beachy on the Beach Brothers Show. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Time to get beachy. How you feeling, my good beach brother, Conrad? Okay. He's enjoying himself so much he doesn't want to move right now.
And how you doing? Good. I'm working on my internet signal.
Yeah, your internet is really funky today, brother. Really funky. So the bilingual beach business bully is back. Good to see you, sir.
I'm back. What's going on, guys? It's good to be back. Always good to see you guys.
Good stuff. Good stuff. So, Con, who do we have on the show today?
Tonight, we have a very special guest, Delegate Lee Carter of the 50th District of Virginia. The 50th District measures Manassas and parts of Prince William County, and this is a historic area of Northern Virginia. Delegate Carter is a 5-year member of the United States Marine Corps. He served tours in the Middle East, the Mediterranean, and was United States military first responder to the catastrophic 2010 Haitian earthquake. A Unitarian Universalist, Delegate Carter also has a background in IT. He's also a 2016 graduate of the Sorensen Institute for Political Leadership. And Delegate Carter, we heartily welcome you to the Beach Brothers Show. And let's get cracking tonight. Glad to have you on. And we know you have a bit of a military history in IT. We would like you to sort of dive into what led you from that into elected office in the first place and why.
Yeah, well, my background is not really normal for folks in politics. Right. The General Assembly is mostly doctors, lawyers, realtors, retirees, because those are the professions that let you take 2 months off to go to Richmond every year. And they also give you a lot of the connections that make fundraising a lot easier. I grew up a military brat. Right. My dad was a Coastie. I grew up in Elizabeth City, actually, so not too far away from Virginia Beach. And when I got out of high school, I joined the Marine Corps and spent 5 years fixing electronics, deployed twice with the 22nd MEU. So I went out on the Baton and the Carter Hall, went to Haiti after the earthquake, got out, moved up to Northern Virginia for work and had no political aspirations, but I got hurt at work in 2015 after a few years of fixing cancer therapy equipments and installing lighting controls. And it was workers' comp that actually got me into politics because it was very, very obvious that I got hurt at work. I was on a construction site when I got shocked, and I couldn't get the money that I was owed. And ultimately, it took 4 years to get a check for $8,000 for ruining my lower back for the rest of my life. And I was 28 years old at the time. Wow. And while I was in the process of fighting this, I started talking to people in politics about my experience with the workers' comp system and how horrible it was. And nobody seemed willing to take up the mantle of changing it. Nobody wanted to fix it. And so, I realized real quick that if this is going to get fixed, it's going to have to be someone who's been through it. And so, it was very much one of those, like, if not me, then who kind of scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
And, I ran for office and ended up winning.
I recall you won in 2017, and
Yep.
Then you won again in 2019, but 16 was when you graduated from Sorensen. What led you to Sorensen?
Sorensen was kind of the first step towards learning how to run for office.
Right.
Like I said, I got hurt in the summer of 2015, and then the fall of 2015 is when I was talking to folks, talking to delegates and senators and their staff, and it was I realized that this wasn't going to get fixed without me, and so then an opportunity came up that was just last minute. I heard that there was a slot available in the candidate training program because someone literally couldn't make it because of snow. And so, I volunteered to fill the slot, and I'm very grateful that they accepted me because I learned a lot through their candidate training program.
Yeah, their candidate training program is excellent. I went through it in 2018. So I guess we're Sorensen brothers as well. So, all right. Hey, interestingly enough, you brought up the universalist, and I'm connected with let me see, what is it? It's the Coastal Virginia Universalist. I've gone to their church a couple of times. I've actually spoken there 6 times. So most people are really unfamiliar with that organization. Can you give us a little bit on that? I think that's spicy. That's really spicy.
Yeah. Unitarian Universalist, it's sort of it's a faith community for people that don't fit in anywhere else. That's kind of the best way to put it. It's very much a catch-all. Everybody's welcome. Everybody's accepted. The single biggest thing is sort of, they don't try to tell you what the answers are. They just try to get you thinking about what the questions in your life are. And in true UU fashion, I claim Bull Run Unitarian Universalist, but I haven't been in quite a while. It's very, very common for people to go a lot for like 6 months and then not show up for 2 years.
Right. Interesting. So they have 7 principles, and let me see: the inherent worth and dignity of every person, justice, equality, and compassion in human relations, acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregation, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, the right for conscience and the use of democratic process within our congregation and in society at large, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, and finally, respect for the independent web of all existence in which we are all part. That's impressive, brother. That's truly impressive of the UUs.
I especially like the aspect that it's the way of treating faith when it doesn't fit in with other things. It's sort of like an outsider version of that. And that sort of reminds me of the fact that you're sort of a comparative firebrand in the General Assembly itself compared to even other Democrats. So you've developed a reputation as a legislative outsider. And part of that is how you're admittedly to the left of what Democrats generally are believed to be. Delegate, how do you approach your life experience with what caused you to become a member of the Democratic Socialists of America? And does that take away from you being a member of our legislative Democratic caucus?
Yeah, so my life experience is very, very different from the rest of my colleagues. I'm one of, I think, 2 members of the General Assembly with no college degree. I'm definitely the poorest member of the General Assembly. I didn't have health insurance when I was first sworn in after the 2017 elections. In fact, I remember about a month into my first term, the health insurance hadn't kicked in yet, and I got sick, and I had to go to urgent care and ask for the cash rate. So, it's very, very, very different from everyone else in the General Assembly, which is by and large a lot wealthier than the public as a whole. I didn't start off as a socialist when I started running for office. I was just a guy. I considered myself to be a Democrat, but I was always sort of a little bit dissatisfied with the way that Democrats were when they were in power. And I didn't really have an explanation for why. I really looked up to some past examples like FDR with the New Deal. And I said, man, why can't Democrats now be more like they were back then on economic issues? It was during the process of running for office. I started running for the 2017 elections in 2016. And I heard Bernie Sanders going around the country and making these clear, convincing moral arguments for the kind of society that he felt we should live in. And they all made sense to me. He was calling himself a socialist. And so I quite literally Googled, what is socialism? I was already a declared candidate at this point, quite literally Googling, what is socialism? And the more I read up on it, the more I realized, it's an umbrella term for an economic system where working people are put at the forefront of ownership and decision making. And there's a lot of very critical analysis of how our capitalist economy works and what the flaws in it are that go into that made a lot of sense. And the more I read and read and read, the more I realized, oh, damn it, I really am one of these. And that's going to make things really, really difficult because, running for office as a socialist in the South is not exactly an easy path. So, it was one of those things where I discovered the label for the things that I've always believed while I was already in the public eye.
I would say that the damn it way of looking at it sort of rings true. Probably saying that a couple of times over the past few years as I got more involved in politics. I am a member of the Virginia Beach Democratic Committee, and I donate every week to them and the Democrat candidates I like. And I ran for city council in Virginia Beach this year with them behind me. But personally, I feel a connection to, say, the Justice Democrat philosophy and their virulently anti-corporatism. They also want a living wage, a more progressive income tax system, Medicare for all, canceled student debt, and others. And much of that, I imagine, you would also like and sort of want to spearhead in Virginia with your leadership role in that. And I take it you could also sense there's a growing amount of not just Democrats, but also progressives who are fighting for causes, but not always seeing eye to eye with the party.
Right. It's funny because when you look at the public as a whole, you ask about these issues. There was an exit poll by Fox News of all people on election day last month, where they showed nationally 72% of people that voted in this election support a government-run healthcare system, so Medicare for all. The overwhelming majority of people support cannabis legalization. The overwhelming majority of people support reducing funding for prisons and police and spending that money on people's well-being instead. These issues overwhelmingly are incredibly popular with the public, but they're incredibly unpopular within our political system because there's an anti-reality bubble that surrounds the Capitol in Richmond and extends for about 6 blocks in any direction, where our legislators are just surrounded by paid lobbyists, really for the entire time that we're down in Richmond for the General Assembly session. And so lobbyists don't represent the public at large. They represent special interests exclusively. And so all that legislators are hearing during the session is these lobbyists. And, even outside of session, 2/3 of what they're hearing is these lobbyists because, my colleagues are expected to be on the phone for 20, 30, 40 hours a week, raising money from rich people and corporations. And that very, very sharply warps the worldview that gets represented in our politics to where the things that are supported by the overwhelming majority of the public, because they're unprofitable to big business interests, are seen as crazy, radical, out of left field things that have absolutely no chance of passage.
Okay. Now, I'm the business bully here on the Beach Brothers show. I'm also the director of membership for the Hampton Roads Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. So I'm curious what you provide philosophy-wise on right to work, workman's compensation, the fact Virginia is the best state to do business in, worker cooperatives, and how we recover from COVID.
Yeah, that stat that Virginia's rated the best place for business also comes with an unfortunate corollary, which is, thankfully not this year, but last year and the year before, Virginia was ranked dead last by Oxfam for working conditions and people's rights and protections in the workplace. And so, the thing that drives my political and economic philosophy is making sure that that working people have a say in the decision making in the workplace. It's where we spend the overwhelming majority of our waking lives. We spend 40, 50, 60 hours a week at work in a place where we're told when to show up, we're told what to do, and then at the end of the day, we don't get a say in any of the processes or any of the outputs. But these are, the decisions that are made in the workplace are decisions that impact all of us. And so, you mentioned worker cooperatives. That's something that's very much a part of this. So, thanks to a bill that I passed this past session, HB 55, worker cooperatives are now a legally recognized type of business in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And what worker cooperatives are they're businesses, which to the consumer looks just like any other. But for the employees, every single employee is an equal part owner, and the decisions are made democratically among them. And so when you have that decision-making process, instead of being, wholly done by outside investors, if it's done by the people in the workplace, you get a lot of different outcomes. So, for example, outsourcing is not something that you're going to see in worker cooperatives because the people who would make the decision to lay off folks here and then send the jobs elsewhere are the people that would be laid off. There's absolutely no chance that they would vote to lay themselves off and send those jobs somewhere where it's cheaper. And that's something that I'm really looking to when it comes to recovering from COVID. We have this massive disruption in our economy. And I think that this is a moment that calls for, rather than going back to the well on the way that we've been doing things, trying to, give hundreds of millions of dollars in subsidies to big corporations to bring in jobs that we don't control. We can take that money and use that to invest in our communities, invest in our working people, and create jobs in worker cooperatives that are here in Virginia and that are essentially immune to outsourcing and that give us control over our lives, over our working conditions, and ultimately over the decisions that impact our entire communities.
Good. We have a new joiner here, Mr. Joel. Unmute yourself, man.
Hey, what's going on, Conrad? Good to see you, brother.
Good to see you. Good to see you. Did you have a chance to read that question there?
So we're just reading the question? Which one on the...
The one I just put in the chat.
Oh, okay. No, it's not up. Hold up. Give me a second. Oh, man. So Virginia is a state that has technology, and it's a state that only recently decriminalized marijuana. We've even had members of the General Assembly and the NAACP representatives charged with crimes related to a monument back when the drives to take down Confederate statues went on enforcement. Police reform is only adjusting to being addressed in 2020. Take us through your vision of social justice in 2020, reforms you've helped to pass and reforms you'd like to get done in 2021, and who's for?
For the delegate.
You were cutting out there a little bit, but I think I got the gist of what you were asking. So, we recently partially decriminalized cannabis possession. Previously it was a criminal offense. Now, if you're caught in possession of cannabis products, it's a civil infraction with a $25 fine. So it's roughly akin to a traffic ticket. But this is an issue where the conversations that we're having have changed incredibly rapidly over the last couple of years. So 2 years ago, I put in a bill for full legalization of cannabis. This was while the Republicans still had control of the General Assembly. And there were two of us that put in legalization bills, and we put them in on the same exact day. It was actually me and Steve Heretic. And it was seen as this wild thing. You know, I had my fellow Democrats coming up to me and saying, "Why are you doing this to us? Why are you putting this in an election year? Don't you realize how crazy this makes us sound? We're going to lose. There's no way we're going to take the majority because you put this bill out there." And you know, I made my presentation about the benefits of cannabis legalization, about some of the historical injustices of cannabis prohibition, and it died along I won't even say a party line vote. I think I only got one vote in support of the bill. It was a very bipartisan vote to kill the cannabis legalization bill in subcommittee, in a criminal law subcommittee 2 years ago. But then we came back after the elections this past year, and there was a ton of energy to do something. And there were, 3 or 4 different cannabis legalization bills. There were 3 or 4 different decriminalization bills, and Governor Northam was on board with this partial decriminalization approach to sort of limit the harm that we're doing for now, while we studied whether or not to fully legalize.
Well, hold on. So, are you saying that your fellow Democrats put getting elected in front of helping the people, and they put getting elected politics in front of helping people? Is that what I'm getting?
Yeah, there's an overwhelming attitude in Richmond, and it's on both sides, right? Democrats and Republicans both do it.
Both of them are messed up. Both of them are messed up.
But what they often say is, we can't help anybody if we don't win. And so they get that sort of backwards justification where holding on to the seat becomes more important than any of the individual issues. And I make the inverse argument where, if you help people, you will win. So it's sort of, we can't build it if we're not here, versus if you build it, they will come. But yeah, the conversation has changed really, really rapidly. And now the discussions that we're having around cannabis legalization are not whether or not to legalize. The discussions we're having are, how do we legalize? What does the regulatory structure look like? And what do we do with the revenue? And my proposal for what we do with the revenue is that it should be one of several revenue streams for reparations. The discussion around reparations is something that our country and our Commonwealth has been caught up on since the 1870s. We haven't really done it, but we have an opportunity now.
Can I interrupt right there?
Yes.
Ms.
Yes.
Delegate. So here's the challenge I'm going to pose to you about. For example, I keep hearing this every time this idea fairy comes in about how we can use money for something. Let's look at our lottery system, for example. The money from the lottery is supposed to go funding education. Convince me that money is going to funding education, because we got some serious problems throughout the state where a lot of the schools are lacking adequacies when it comes to funding for book materials. And let's say, like recently, when a lot of these needed laptops, right, a few years ago, why was the state struggling to get to the school when all this lottery money is supposed to have been divvied out to the states? So now you're telling me that when we start taxing this cannabis, you're saying for reparation. I'm more concerned about education and reparations. So that's not going to get my vote for you to tell me that it's going toward reparations when we still have schools, let's say like the Renaissance School in Virginia Beach.
Bro, those are two different things.
They still need money. Right. But so my point is, the whole thing is, where is this money going versus directly toward reparations, when I feel education is a lot more important than trying to manage for some reparations.
Right. So I think it's important to talk about what I mean when I say funding towards reparations. So my plan is to create a commission on what that reparations spending looks like. And there are a lot of things that could go into that, right? Targeted education funding towards impacted communities is certainly one of the things that would be on the menu, along with investments in community-owned enterprises and starting worker cooperatives, and some direct cash payments to people that have been negatively impacted by the war on drugs over the last 4 or 5 decades. My proposal is to just go ahead and sequester the new revenue from the cannabis tax ahead of time, to put it away into a fund and then figure out how best to equitably spend it towards reparations and what that looks like once we actually have the money. But you do touch on a really good point when it comes to the lottery money. The lottery money is supposed to be 100% for education, but what we've seen over the last 25 years, particularly with Republican control over the General Assembly, is that instead of using the lottery money to increase education spending, they use the lottery money to replace education spending. So money that was going from the general fund into education was reduced. So instead of spending $10 from the general fund, they reduced that. They spend $10 from the lottery fund instead, so that the total funding level didn't increase at all, just the source. And then they usually gave tax cuts and big business incentives with that money. So that's very much a larger issue within the budgeting process here in Virginia, is that our priorities are completely backwards. We incarcerate more people per capita than any other country in history, and number 2 isn't even close. So we're spending tons of money on prisons and police, and we're giving hundreds of millions of dollars to big corporations like Nestle and Amazon, and we're not spending money educating kids, feeding kids, fixing our infrastructure. There's so many more important things that we need to be doing. You're absolutely right.
I want to touch a bit on a little bit back on my history this year. This past week, the Breeden Company, which is in Virginia Beach, let city leaders know that they want to develop a new hotel next to the Virginia Beach Convention Center. And it's a kind of a redundant plan when you think about the ocean front, especially considering that the DoubleTree is already a football field away from the convention center. But the Breeden Company spent $5,000 on a donation to Republican Mayor Bobby Dyer, and he won this year. They spent $5,000 on at-large Republican City Council member Rosemary Wilson, and she won this year. And they spent $3,000 on Democrat mayor candidate Jody Wagner, and she lost to Bobby. My opponent this year also had generous gifts from tens of thousands of property management and builder dollars, and it's looking like the strong real estate interest of the city spent their donations pretty wisely. Delegate, you're particularly anti-corporatism, and as a mover in Virginia politics, we'd like you to delve more deeper into corporate control, corruption, and how to reform all that here in the state of Virginia.
Yeah. One of the things that I've said from the beginning of my first campaign is that I won't take a single dime from for-profit corporations or industry interest groups. And that's because, I feel that it's my job to represent my constituents and not the special interests. But what you hear oftentimes in Richmond when you start talking about this stuff is, you bring up corporate money and there's this chorus of voices of people saying, oh, well, I've never changed my vote because of a contribution. But that defense kind of rests on this cartoonish assumption of what corruption in politics is. It's not somebody passing an envelope full of cash under the table to a delegate or a senator and saying, if you vote our way on this, we're going to be good to you. It's not that. That's what you see in the movies, but that's not what really happens. What really happens is the campaign finance system that we have just creates incentives and creates a structure where the kinds of people who win generally are the kinds of people who would vote that way to begin with. Right, so they don't have to change their vote to vote in line with business interests because that's the way that they're naturally inclined to go. And so, in order to fix this, I think we need to tackle the root cause of of this distortion in our political system, and that's campaign finance. We have absolutely no limits on contributions whatsoever. So, perfect example, Nick Freitas out of Culpeper. He got a single check for $500,000 from a casino owner in, I think, Wyoming. And that was essentially the entire funding for his reelection campaign. And that's something that just absolutely cannot stand if we want to call ourselves a democracy. Because instead of a one person, one vote system, we have a $1 one vote system.
Yeah, I would agree with that. What about the money spent by Virginia Democratic Party on behalf of Wagner? That was just a bet considering it was for a nonpartisan seat. Even though we do admit as candidates that we are members of parties from time to time, even though the position might be nonpartisan. I do kind of think that there are also some parallels between you and the fellow delegate, Mr. Nick, and how outsider you are relative to the party you're in. Of course, he's gotten a little bit more Trump than I would have liked him have been, because I've known him for a few years. He's pretty cool, and he's very good at rhetoric and being able to speak Republican values out. It's just, this seemed like you guys are both outsiders and are really good at doing that. So interesting little way to bring that in. Mr. Joel, I would like you to come in with the next cool question.
All right. So the Black Panthers were a notable socialist group of the 1960s, and they were notable for users of guns and even took over the California General Assembly once as they walked over. And that I am a prominent gun user, seeing how I'm a part of the National African American Gun Association, and I'm a proud member and supporter of the Second Amendment. And I start the first chapter out here for the Virginia Beach Hampton Roads Gun Club, which is Strong Arms Hampton Roads Gun Club. Could you break down your view of gun rights and the Virginia gun legislation so we can get an understanding of what your views are with that?
Yeah, I think my view on guns is the one that's guaranteed to make both parties angry. I am a gun owner, right? I did 5 years in the Marine Corps. If there's one thing that Marines know, it's firearms. And when I first came into office, there were definitely some things that needed to change. There were some ways that we could be better in making sure that our communities were safe, which is why I supported universal background checks and safe storage requirements. But there's also a lot of proposals from the Democratic Party that are just completely divorced from reality. Right. A bill idea is that clearly the people that came up with them don't own guns, have never used guns, didn't grow up around them, and have no idea what they're talking about, which is why I opposed things like the red flag laws and the so-called assault weapons ban. So I think that our firearm laws now are mostly in a good place, although I would like to get rid of a couple of the things that were passed this year. That I feel do more harm than good. But fundamentally, my philosophy when it comes to firearm ownership is that, we're in a period of time where there is the potential for politically motivated violence. We've seen a lot of white nationalist terrorist attacks over the last few years. And so my stance is anyone who is at risk of that kind of violence should have the means to protect themselves from that kind of violence. So I'm absolutely never going to do anything that disarms vulnerable people, that disarms activists, that disarms people that are trying to protect their families and their homes. And that's something that puts me very much at odds with my own party. But I also don't think that it should be a complete free for all, which puts me at odds with the Republican Party. Right. So I'm in this in between where it's like, there's a couple of tweaks that we need to make, but the Republicans want no gun restrictions and the Democrats want no guns. And I'm neither of those.
Yeah, that's an interesting place to be in. I think that, I'm a gun owner. You're a gun owner. Joel is definitely a gun owner advocate.
I got 3 in that closet right there.
I think you just made Joel's day. You have 3. And Jose's a gun owner as well. So yeah,
Hey,
I
Seko,
forgot that. Yes, sir.
if I may say, I've heard the recent talks of legislation about there were some proposals about shutting down gun ranges, indoor gun ranges, and making it unlawful. I mean, just things like that is what really sparks fear in others to say, hey, you know, went
You're breaking
after
up really
business.
bad,
Why are
Joel.
we proposing
Yeah.
things like this?
Yeah,
You're breaking up really bad, Joel. But go ahead.
Your audio was breaking up bad, but I did hear, you had some concerns about some of the proposals that fortunately did not pass. But yeah, that bill to close down indoor gun ranges was one of the ones that was particularly just off the wall. And it's like, where are these things coming from? Like nobody who actually owns and safely uses firearms thinks that closing down indoor gun ranges is a good idea. So I have no idea where that bill came from. I'm glad that it didn't pass. And this is one of the things that, like I said, puts me at odds with my party is that I actually do own guns. I've had rifles in my hand since I was 18 when I joined the Marine Corps. I know them intimately. They're, my firearms are like a part of my body. I know what is and is not good gun legislation, and that very much was not.
I do think that guns and the ability to arm yourself, I often say arm yourself or harm yourself, has been foundational in a lot of the change that we've seen in our great country. If we take it back to the 60s, people talk about Dr. Martin Luther King and his stance on nonviolence, but he also had the Deacons for the Defense of Justice, a gun club that protected the marchers after what happened on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. So they saw, hey, these white supremacists ain't playing. We need to have some guns ourselves. So the next marches, and from that point on, they had arms. They just weren't shown. And interestingly enough, a lot of that stupidity that happened stopped. Not all of it. Not all of it.
Yeah.
But a lot of it.
But a good amount.
Yeah, I do like to say, if you go far enough left, you get the guns back.
Pretty much.
Brother Jose, I know you're up next, good brother. You're up next.
Yes, sir. Thanks. I'll take it. You've spoken on stage in support of Bernie Sanders. You and friend of the Beach Brothers show delegate Elizabeth Guzman were on his Virginia team. You're both increasingly prominent Virginia politicians, so your view is important on this. How needed was Bernie Sanders to the 2020 election process? What does his progressivism mean for modern Democrats? And keep it in mind, it looks like the Republican side of the Virginia governor race in 2021 will feature independent Republican Amanda Shea running against the winner of the Republican convention selection. How significant is the moment for a progressive Democrat to be the nominee in Virginia's 2021 race?
Yeah, I spoke on stage with Bernie twice, once in Manassas and once in Springfield. And I've mentioned this before that, we need to not only get rid of Donald Trump and the harm that he's done over the last 4 years, we also need to change the system that enabled Donald Trump to come to power in the first place. And that's the importance of the outsiders within the Democratic Party, right? This is the struggle that we're having within the Democratic Party is between the faction that's currently in control, the Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden faction that just wants to go back to November 1st of 2016 and the way that things were under President Obama, versus the Bernie Sanders faction that I'm very much a part of, that says that we need to address the structural problems in our economy and in our political system and in our media environment that allowed something like Donald Trump's presidency to happen. It's not going to be a pretty fight. The 2021 primary coming up for the gubernatorial race and LG and Attorney General is really the first sort of post-Trump battlefield. in that fight, but that fight's been going on for many years. And that's what Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign was about. It's what the Occupy movement was about. It's what the anti-globalization protests in the 90s were about, and the early 2000s. It's something that we've been fighting over ever since the last political realignment in the 1960s and 1970s. And it continues now, and it's going to keep continuing until the Democratic Party puts people in charge that are actually willing to go at the root of the problem.
Interesting. Okay, Brother Conrad? Did I lose everybody?
So
There we go.
where'd Joe go?
Lost everybody for a second.
There we go.
Seko's off stage.
Wow, things go crazy, man. You start talking about changing things, and the internet didn't like it.
Let me tell you, I've been on MSNBC one time. They called me on to talk about what socialism meant and what the prospect of electing a socialist to the president was all about. They had me on that one time, and I made my argument as best as I could, and they haven't called me back. So I think that means I made my point.
Well, can you guys hear me? I'm still hearing static.
Now we can. There we go.
If I may go back to something the delegate was discussing earlier when we were discussing the right to work. So, say I'm a business owner, a small business, and you mentioned some particulars about the employees having to say so, and you added to that, hey, we're being told to come to work, what to do. Now, I see that you're a military background. Mm-hmm. However, at the same time, when a civilian job, nobody makes you come to work. Nobody force you to get up and come to this job. You have a choice. Either you go to this job or you don't go to the job. You don't get paid, right? So if you're saying that allow the employees to have more say-so in what's going on, all right, let's say this is not productive. This is not helping my bottom line, my profit. And then I'm worrying about, 200. Well, employer from clothing shop and taking this business to another nation, because if you continue to promote more of the employees have a say so, then in many ways this is telling the employers, say, you know what, I don't like this particular style of development. I don't like what's going on with this, and they move out. I think it's a double-edged sword. There's nothing wrong with the employees, in my opinion, having some input, seeking the input from the employees, because that's like any leader. Any leader should seek out some guidance, some input from those that are leading, and that includes the employees.
So what's your question, bro? What's your question?
Making it mandatory. Why do you feel that's the best route to go for employment, for the employees, as you said, having to say so?
Yeah, so what I was referring to was the structure of a worker cooperative, right? It's a different way of incorporating a business, and it's one where there's not a single owner in charge, right? It's a business that's owned by the people who work there, and so what this looks like on the small scale. There are small scale examples already, even before the law that legally recognized them. It could look, on the small scale, like a diner where every 2 weeks the staff, they clean the tables off and they have a staff meeting. They pull out the balance sheets, they pull out the schedules, and they decide amongst themselves who's going to take what shift, where the money goes. Does this bill get paid in advance, or do we wait until it's actually due? Do we pay a bonus? Do we reinvest? All those decisions get made democratically among the people that own and operate the business, because they're all equal part owners. They're all partners. On the large scale, what it looks like in places where the law is much friendlier to this type of organization is, the world's largest worker cooperative is called Mondragon. It's a conglomerate that's based out of Spain that started with a dozen guys in a church basement back in the 1950s. Now they have 87,000 employee owners, and they operate in 90 some odd different countries. And they've never had a layoff, right? Through all the tough times that they've been through all the economic crashes, they have never had a layoff, because the executives, instead of answering to a board of directors that are elected by shareholders, the executives have to run for re-election among the employee owners, right? So the people who decide who the executive is that's in charge are the people that are bound by that executive's decisions, right? So this is just talking about structuring businesses a different way. It's an alternative form of ownership that's not, just one person at the top or a group of investors at the top dictating how things happen. This is a very participatory way of setting up an enterprise. And so, you don't get that decision where, the one person who used to be in charge doesn't like the way that things are going, and so they decide to move the entire enterprise out and fire everybody. That doesn't happen, because the people that would be fired are the people that are making the decisions.
Now we're going to get into a little bit of our ad breaks, and I'd like to always touch on that when I go to my customer service job at the beach, I have a very safe car I'm able to do that in, a Volkswagen Jetta, which I got in Chesapeake, Virginia, 1248 South Military Highway, part of the Southern Auto Group, Southern Volkswagen. I want you to have a safe car just like I do, one that gets around town just nice and with good gas mileage. So go down to 1248 South Military Highway, speak with Cynthia Rawlings and Charlie Roy, and get yourself a nice around 757 car.
All right. And we also want to thank commonsenseforyou.org. That's commonsenseforyou.org. They have beautiful soaps. They smell good. They're great for your body. If you really want to be healthy, you can focus on the things you eat, but you should also think about the things that you place on your body. So commonsenseforyou.org has healthy beauty aids that will make you beautiful and healthy on the inside as well as on the outside. That's commonsenseforyou.org. And I'm Seko Varner. I provide funding for real estate investors. So if you're a real estate investor and you need funds for your upcoming investment, I can help you with 90% of the acquisition costs and 100% of the rehab costs. Yeah, so I know that our good brother Joel Jones does a lot of construction. I'm sure that his investors, the people that he works with, could benefit from having 90% acquisition costs covered and 100% of those rehab costs covered. Yeah, so if you're looking for those funds, give me a call, Seko Varner. All right, let's continue.
Well, Mr. Delegate Carter, can you break down what's special about 50, about Manassas, and that little bit about Prince William, and important places there and businesses that you really like and would like to shout out?
The 50th district, it's got the city of Manassas, and it's got part of western Prince William County. And this is a place that it's the first place I've ever felt like home. I was a military brat growing up. I was born in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. I moved to Florida before I can remember. I started school in Mobile, Alabama. I moved back to Elizabeth City when I was about 8. But I never really felt at home there. And then I got out of the Marine Corps. I moved to Northern Virginia for work. I think I'm the only person to move to Northern Virginia after leaving the military. But man, I fell in love with this place. It's where Northern Virginia stops, right? It's the border. If you're in Manassas and you're looking east, it is just all city all the way up to Boston. If you're looking west, it is trees and cows and nothing else. And it's the fact that you can have both, right? We're an hour away from somewhere you can swim. We're an hour away from somewhere you can hike in the mountains. It's the only place I've ever lived in my life that has 4 full real seasons. We get a real winter, which is something that I'd never had in my life before. But it's just my district. It's 85,000 people from all walks of life, from all over the place, all over the country, all over the world. I can't even count the number of languages that are spoken in my district. And we're all just trying to get on with our lives. We're all just trying to keep a roof over our heads and pay the bills and put our kids through school. And it feels like a small town, even though it's part of the DC area. It still feels like a small town. So you get that best of both worlds there. And I love this place, man. I have never, ever felt the way about anywhere else that I've lived that I do about Manassas. And, you got to get away from 66 to feel that, right? I live in Old Town. But if you're in Northern Virginia, come on by Old Town Manassas. It's gorgeous. It's walkable. There's a ton of stuff to do. You will fall in love with it just as much as I did.
Yeah, I've been out there before. It's nice. Years ago.
But you got to get away from 66, because up by 66, it's all car dealerships and fast food. But that's someone else's district. That ain't mine.
Interesting. You got my attention now. I might have to go up that way.
Yeah, it does sound interesting, doesn't it?
Road trip.
We got a little bit of everything up here.
A lot of good hunting.
Beef Brothers road trip.
All right. Hey, before we go into any other commentary, we wanted to make sure that everyone got a chance to listen to the good brother Carter live.
The delegate from Manassas, Delegate Carter.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise for a point of personal privilege.
Delegate Carter, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We hear very often on this floor, particularly from the other side of the aisle, a very narrow, limited understanding of history. Madam Speaker, that narrow and limited understanding of history has blinders on it that puts out of sight and out of mind the atrocities that have been committed by this country. It puts out of sight and out of mind the genocide of Native Americans who lived on this land before we did. It puts out of sight and out of mind the hundreds of millions of Africans who were brought across the Atlantic and did not make it against their will and died en route.
Ooh, the internet is not our friend tonight.
That's quite all right. You noticed the title on that. That was actually uploaded by the Republican Party of Virginia. I appreciate you bringing that clip up. I get emotional on the floor. There's a lot of things that I'm very passionate about. I cannot stand anything that looks or smells like injustice to me. And one of the things that drives me is, I think, a different view of what patriotism means, right? We hear all the time from the Republican Party in particular that patriotism is just saber rattling and, whatever the U.S. does is automatically right. We're the good guys and that's that. And there's a trail of bodies that we leave behind everywhere that we go. But to me, what patriotism means to me is taking pride in our communities and the way that we care for each other, taking pride in our capacity to do good and do right by others, right? It's not pride in our country for the sake that it's ours and therefore we automatically defend everything that it does, right? It's about the pride in what it could be. But in order to live up to that potential, that promise, we have got to change the way we're doing things. We've got to start focusing vulnerable people. They have got to be number one in our worldview. They've got to be number one in the way that we operate things. It's not just about enriching the people that have the most. It's about enriching the most lives.
We could say that it's introspection that's one of the best parts to make us a better person individually, and the ability to look introspectively as a state of Virginia or as a country of the United States. which would help us progress forward. That way we know what we were, and so we can better. And better is always the goal.
I don't know. I can see why my conservative family thinks you're trash. You know, the name of that video was Delegate praises Socialist Delegate trashes America or something like that.
Oh, is that
Joel,
what they
what
put
were you
on
about
there?
to say? Yeah, what were you going to say, Joel? Okay. Yeah, Joel, we're all happy.
I think it was a very, very passionate. Yeah. Well,
I'm gonna have to watch the whole video.
It was very, very passionate. Yeah, I've seen that one, and when I did see the first time, very passionate. So I mean, everybody's going to have to spin on something that they want to make out to what they want to be. But it was a very passionate spiel.
Passion is a good thing.
Good. You want to wrap things up? It's that time.
Let's wrap it up. Who got the last one?
Okay. Well, Delegate Carter, you talked a little bit about some things that you been like in your area. What are some of your favorite restaurants?
Ooh, I'd have to say Okra's Cajun and Creole. I love that place, although I don't get to eat there very much because it is a little out of my budget range. But you know, it's the place that I sort of default to for special occasions, just because there's nowhere else in town to get alligator bites.
Good stuff.
Alligator surprisingly good.
Yeah, and crawfish.
And crawfish.
Like I said, I mean, when I started school, you know, I was 5, 6, 7 years old growing up in Mobile, Alabama, down there on the Gulf Coast. I mean, we are just crawling with crawfish down there. So, you know, having a place here in town that I can get it, even if it is only for special occasions, it's just another thing. You know, it's one of those pieces of what I liked about somewhere else that I can get here.
This area has a Bayou Boogaloo back when there's not COVID. And that was the first time I ever tried crawfish. And it is something to experience when you have not experienced it for over 25 years. You're like, oh, this is what crawfish is.
Right.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Well, the fact that you connected cannabis and reparations was intriguing to me. I know that we'll probably have to have a second pass and really talk about reparations. I know that Joel had a really interesting point that we really need to dive into, and I would like to dive in. You're having a good time, Joel. But we want to take this time to say goodbye. Thank you for coming on the show.
Yes, sir.
And what do you have in your immediate future?
So right now, I'm looking forward to the 2021 session. You know, typically on odd numbered years, our sessions are 46 days long. It looks like it's going to be 30 because the Republicans are not allowing us to have the customary extension that we normally have. So we've got a much stricter limit on the number of bills that we can put in. But, you know, I'm still fighting to fix our workers' comp system so that you don't get fired when you fall off a ladder. I'm still going to be fighting to end the death penalty, fighting to fix our campaign finance system by banning corporate contributions and making sure that it's individuals only. There's about 22, 23 states out there that already do this. We can be the next one. There's a whole lot on my plate, and that plate is real small because of the limitations that the pandemic has put on this session, that the Republicans are putting on this session. So it's going to be a sprint for those 30 days in January and February, but just going to keep pushing to bring this Commonwealth forward, bring it into the 21st century, and try to make it the absolute best place in the world to live.
Just keep fighting for my guns.
Better make common sense.
All right. Well, you've been enjoying the Beach Brothers show today. We had Delegate Lee Carter. We thank him. We had our good brother Joel Jones, who's tapped in. He'll be joining us a lot in the future. Good to have you here, brother Joel Jones. Good brother Conrad Chesventer, our Politico, and our business bully, Jose Cruz. Thank you for watching the Beach Brothers show. This show was brought to you by Positive Vibes Incorporated, our consulting services. We do credit fixes, we do tax resolution, we lend private money, and debt consolidation. So if you need some of these services, we're waiting here for you. Credit fixes, tax resolutions, private money, and debt consolidation. Make sure you call Positive Vibes Incorporated.